Welcome to the Cheating Story Lab. Share your location below. There are times when you believe you truly know someone only to discover they're a stranger altogether, and there are those strangers who have been fleecing you for years without your knowledge. I am Richard, believing I was wedded to Victoria, a struggling artist struggling financially. In reality, I was married to a financial wizard who, while feigning poverty, covertly amassed millions. This narrative delves into the tale of how her insatiable greed led to her downfall. I crossed paths with Victoria 15 years ago at a coffee shop where she peddled her artwork. She bore a bohemian aesthetic, fingerprints smeared with paint, and spoke of preferring creation over accumulation of wealth. Her genuine demeanor in a world fixated on riches captivated me instantly. In this compact studio apartment, she resided, drove an aged Honda, and appeared to subsist on ramen noodles and devotion towards her art. As a successful software engineer, I enjoyed a comfortable income and found fulfillment in catering to her needs. I covered all expenses: rent, groceries, artistic supplies, even upgrading our residence when we cohabited. She would consistently object, expressing feelings of guilt about my support of her aspirations, but I persisted. I held the conviction that I was fostering an artist's pursuit rather than selling out to corporate America. Our marriage did not alter our financial situation. I managed all bills: the mortgage on our house, car payments when her Honda eventually ceased functioning, every expense. Victoria would contribute merely a couple of $100s a month from selling paintings occasionally, and I assumed this was her entire income. She seemed ashamed about her contributions, always expressing regret for not contributing more. However, unbeknownst to me, Victoria possessed exceptional financial acumen in ways I failed to recognize. She meticulously clipped coupons, consistently sought out bargains, and managed to stretch a dollar further than anyone I was acquainted with. I assumed this behavior stemmed from her having to be frugal due to financial constraints during her upbringing. She shared tales of her family losing their home when she was a teenager, wearing used clothes to school, and always struggling financially. This background made me feel protective towards her. For years, our dynamic functioned smoothly. I perceived myself as the provider while she was the dreamer, and we complemented each other nicely. She would paint in the studio space I created for her while I worked my corporate job. We appeared content. She was affectionate, considerate, and always expressing gratitude for making her dreams a reality. I felt as though I was living a captivating love story where money held little significance because we had something more valuable. However, our relationship began to crumble in other aspects. Victoria grew distant, attending art events and networking functions more frequently. She often returned home late, carrying a scent of costly wine and offering flimsy explanations. When I proposed accompanying her as a show of support, she dismissed such events as dull and believed I wouldn't appreciate them. Warning signs were abundant, yet trust overshadowed suspicion. The turning point arrived when I discovered lewd messages on her phone. It wasn't merely infidelity, but infidelity with numerous partners, and the messages indicated this had been happening for at least 2 years. Confronting her yielded no denial. Instead, she met my gaze with an icy stare and admitted to being unhappy for some time. I promptly filed for divorce. My attorney cautioned that Virginia was a state requiring no-fault divorce, implying the infidelity may not significantly impact the financial settlement. Given our 12-year union and my consistent role as the primary earner, substantial alimony payments seemed imminent. The residence we inhabited was legally marital property, despite me having funded the entire down payment and every mortgage installment. However, it was during our initial mediation session that Victoria's performance truly commenced. Dressed casually and worn, she appeared the epitome of a struggling artist, lugging a tattered purse and embodying every inch of her portrayed role. She communicated to the mediator that she had forsaken her career prospects to sustain our marriage, asserting that I had persuaded her to concentrate on her art rather than securing employment. Her attorney portrayed me as a domineering spouse who had kept my wife financially dependent and was now trying to abandon her. They demanded spousal support amounting to $4,000 monthly for 6 years, in addition to half the value of our house, plus half of my retirement savings. According to their estimates, I would essentially be left with no financial resources at age 42 while supporting my former wife's lifestyle, as depicted by her. Victoria skillfully enacted her character. She would express fear for her future and concern about how she would manage without my support when discussing these matters. She mentioned her upbringing in poverty, her absence of business expertise, and the necessity of time to grow her art career. The mediator showed clear empathy towards her predicament. My attorney attempted to counter, but we lacked substantial arguments. Admittedly, she had deceived us, but this doesn't instantly make someone ineligible for alimony. It was acknowledged that she could work, yet she pursued a creative profession with unpredictable income. On paper, all her statements appeared rational. At that moment, I made a decision that flipped the situation upside down. There was something about Victoria's conduct that seemed too polished, too strategized. The woman I wed had been sincerely modest about money, but this persona seemed to know precisely which emotional strings to tug. I employed a private investigator to scrutinize her background, not for proof of infidelity, but to comprehend her financial status better. What he discovered left me utterly astounded. Victoria wasn't merely selling odd paintings. She was selling a significant number of them. For more than 10 years, she managed a highly refined art enterprise. Pieces of her artwork were displayed and sold in galleries spanning 3 different states. Private collectors paid tens of thousands for these pieces, while major corporations commissioned installations from her. Yet this was nothing compared to the astonishment that followed. She secretly stowed away every cent she earned. Unbeknownst to me, she owned business accounts, an LLC registered under her maiden name, and investment accounts that had been expanding for years. A private investigator calculated her concealed assets to surpass $2 million. Not only was she misrepresenting her income, but she was also intentionally obscuring our overall financial status while I wrestled with paying all the bills. Meanwhile, as I economized by consuming generic cereal to finance her art supplies, she had a stock portfolio that outperformed mine. While postponing household repairs for budget reasons, she secretly acquired investment properties via an unacknowledged business entity. What enraged me most was the meticulousness of it all. She had thoroughly examined tax ramifications, established legal frameworks to keep affairs distinct, and accrued wealth while making me feel remorseful over every penny I spent on myself. I had been driving an old car out of fiscal prudence. Meanwhile, she possessed enough funds to purchase a luxury vehicle in cash. Equipped with this knowledge, we returned to court, but now I was the one with a plan. I didn't disclose my awareness immediately. I allowed Victoria and her attorney to articulate their case first, giving them ample opportunity to portray her as financially helpless and reliant. Victoria tearfully recounted her lack of financial knowledge, relying on me to manage everything, and having minimal understanding of investments or business finances. She disclosed a modest $1,500 in her checking account and outstanding credit card debts. Portraying herself as an innocent artist vulnerable against the harsh corporate world, she pleaded for protection. The judge was visibly moved by her narrative, expressing empathy towards her perceived abandonment. He acknowledged the court's duty to help maintain her dignity while rebuilding her life. Recognizing the insufficiency of the proposed alimony amount, I requested my attorney to present our evidence. We presented bank records detailing deposits from her art sales totaling over $300,000 in the last 2 years. Victoria paled considerably, attempting to downplay the situation by labeling the sales as exceptions rather than indicative of her usual earnings. However, upon revealing our evidence of her 8-year-old LLC, she found herself in a predicament, since the paperwork was open to public scrutiny and her lawyer could not contest it. The judge directly questioned Victoria about concealed business assets, leaving her visibly flustered as we unveiled investment account statements worth over $400,000, comprising mutual funds, bonds, and individual stocks. She attempted to explain them away as family gifts. However, our records demonstrated consistent transfers from her business accounts. But the clincher was the real estate holdings, which irrevocably weakened her argument. 2 properties, owned under her maiden name, consistently brought in more than $3,000 a month as rental income. These were assets bought in cash while our financial situation seemed precarious to me. As our marriage progressed, she had accumulated over $2 million worth of assets, yet claimed poverty. The judge questioned how someone without business experience could amass such wealth, and she, Victoria, confessed the truth. She admitted that she was apprehensive about our marriage and sought financial security. She promised to disclose this later, but never did. The judge found no compassion for her explanation. He stated that honesty is the foundation of marriage, and her intentional deceit had undermined the entire case. Consequently, Victoria received no alimony and was ordered to reimburse me for all legal expenses related to uncovering her concealed assets. However, this wasn't the end. After Victoria's financial fraud was documented in court, the Internal Revenue Service started investigating her undeclared income. It was discovered that not only was she concealing money from me, but also from the government. She owed substantial back taxes, penalties, and interest on years of unreported earnings. Moreover, because she had been running rental properties without proper disclosure, she encountered problems with insurance claims and local business licensing regulations. Ultimately, her intricately planned financial structure collapsed due to her excessive greed for my money. The divorce proceedings were completed 6 months later. I retained the house, my retirement funds, and did not pay a cent in alimony. Victoria had to sell some of her concealed assets to cover her legal expenses and tax debts. The woman who aimed to leave with half of everything I had accumulated ended up financially worse off than if she had been truthful from the start. Over time, it became apparent that Victoria had meticulously orchestrated her departure for years. She wasn't merely involved in emotional and physical infidelities. She was betraying our partnership and preparing to maximize her gains upon leaving. Her actions revealed a long-term strategy, accumulating wealth while keeping me uninformed, likely planning to divorce once her assets were substantial enough. The hardest part wasn't the money or the affairs. It was discovering that the woman I believed in, the struggling artist I took pride in supporting, didn't exist. Every financial discussion we had, every instance where I urged her to pursue her dreams instead of focusing on finances, every sacrifice made to support what I thought was our shared dream, was built upon deceit. However, there is a sense of vindication in witnessing how her own greed ultimately led to her demise. If Victoria had been truthful about her success, we could have achieved great things together. If she had requested a fair share of our marital property instead of portraying herself as a victim, she could have left with a substantial portion. However, her greed for all the wealth, hidden assets, affairs, and my money led to her losing everything. Occasionally, I ponder what might have transpired if I hadn't hired that private investigator, if I had merely accepted her tale of victimhood and paid the alimony. She would have successfully executed one of the most intricate financial frauds I've ever witnessed, but it was her flawless performance, her polished act, that made me delve deeper. Now, I find myself in a much improved state. I've learned to focus on actions rather than mere words, and I've reconstructed my life on a basis of genuine honesty. Victoria taught me that the most deceptive lies are those cloaked in love and trust, but she also showed me that truth eventually emerges when it is needed the most. This is my tale. Have you ever found that someone near you was living an entirely distinct truth compared to what they presented? Recall to comment and stay tuned for additional tales illustrating how truth eventually surfaces.